She says, "Thanks for your support as you heard my story too. Little bits of it. It's just the beginning, but my goodness, it's been really great to be able to share it with you." Just a little bit. We've heard tons of her story, both in her old podcast and now in this one. She's saying that it's just the beginning. What does that mean? What does that mean? How much more of her story can we hear? How many interviews has she given? She's already talked to Netflix for 6 hours straight about her story, has she not? She's already given interviews, The Cut, and to the New York Times, and how many ad nauseum articles from people. Meghan, we know your story. We know your story. You're God's gift. You're the People's Princess 2.0, and you're just here to elevate our ordinary, mundane experience. That is your whole reason for being. You are going to teach us how to be as cool and enlightened and wonderful as you. I would rather just go to the search bar on YouTube and just type in how to start a business, hit enter, and a bajillion videos will pop up. That'll be 10 million times better than this drivel. This drivel is just that, a bunch of drivel that I really hope that you didn't waste your time on. I really, really hope that you just let me do all the listening for you. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Jennifer. I am so happy to have you here. I'm happy to have you here because I just need a friend. I need someone to hold my hand and tell me that everything is going to be okay. The trauma that I have endured over Meghan's Confessions of a Female Founder podcast, it's a lot. It's a lot. I have officially listened to 3 of the 8 episodes. And like I said, I'm happy you're here with me. Virtual hug. I just feel like I need a friend. I wore black today because I believe it's fitting, because I feel that we are attending a funeral, and that is the funeral of Meghan's podcast. Now, this is the, I guess, death of now her second podcast. There has been nothing in the media from Meghan or the company that she's partnering with for this disastrous podcast, Lemonada. There's been nothing from them about whether or not there will be a second season planned. There were only the 8 episodes, and I guess that is what we are looking at. And this podcast, you guys, again, you know I try to be as fair as I can. You know I try to be as diplomatic as I can. I am praying for Harry and Meghan. I am praying for these fools to just course correct and just atone and change their lives and stop this craziness. They ain't gonna do it. And I don't like to see people flounder and fail like this, but you reap what you sow. And this podcast is just so incredibly, it's infuriatingly boring. It failed to chart on Apple or Spotify. It fell off of the Spotify charts, I think like within weeks of it debuting on there. It's been a complete and total ratings disaster. The critics, whether it's the media or whether it's YouTubers like myself, we're all talking about how it's boring. It's supposed to be a podcast about female founders and entrepreneurs and how to succeed in business. There's no business advice to be had. She does have some women on there that are somewhat successful, some more so than others, but we're talking millionaires to even up to billionaires, but there's no real knowledge. There's nothing being shared that could help a regular person listening, that can inspire them or give them real concrete action steps to move forward to propel a business. It's just a bunch of self-grandiose, posturing. Usually it feels like Meghan and her guest are giving each other tongue baths of compliments. It's so infuriating. Yeah, each of the 8 episodes, they're self-indulgent. There's a lack of focus. I mean, I could go on and on and on. And we all know that this Confessions of a Female Founder podcast, this was coming off of the tail of her first podcast. Remember the Spotify deal she had, which was allegedly worth, $20 million? Now, by what I've researched, it's unlikely that she made 20 million, because what Forbes magazine said was that It probably failed to reach what they called productivity benchmarks, because even that podcast with Spotify, that Archetypes podcast, which we all know, that really failed in the ratings. And it also just was a huge disconnect with viewers and critics. That podcast wasn't well received either. So now this raging dumpster fire, Confessions of a Female Founder, debuted this past April in 2025. And again, even worse of a ratings disaster than her Spotify Archetypes podcast. And again, not a hit with critics and not resonating with audiences at all. We all know that Spotify didn't renew their contract with her. And even one of the executives, Bill Simmons, was famously quoted on a podcast as saying that her and Harry are just effing grifters. They don't want to work. They didn't want to come up with any ideas. They were floundering. And do you remember when they first talked about what they were going to release with Spotify? This was probably back in I want to say December 2021. But do you remember that their first podcast venture was supposed to be Meghan and Harry together in their Archwell audio podcast, where they were going to talk to change makers and humanitarians and different people out in the world and in the culture, voices that they wanted to amplify.
Should we start? No? Ladies first?
No, say it, because I think it sounds really nice with your accent.
What, Archwell Audio?
Yeah.
Archwell Audio.
I mean...
Really?
Shall we?
Yeah, let's do it. Hi guys, I'm Harry.
And I'm Meghan. One of the things my husband and I have always talked about is our passion for meeting people and hearing their stories. No matter what the story, they offer you an understanding of where someone is coming from, and at the same time remind you in some way about yourself.
That's what this project is all about, to bring forward different perspectives and voices and find our common ground. Because when that happens, change really is possible.
Woo! And you know, this is also a moment to celebrate kindness and compassion, which will underlie everything you hear from Archwell Audio.
But that never came to fruition, and it ended up just being Meghan on her Archetype podcast, and that's when everything went downhill. So as far as this lemonada deal goes that Meghan signed to produce and put out this Confessions of a Female Founder podcast, there was nothing recorded in the media about it being an upfront money deal the way that the Spotify one was. So everyone is speculating that this was a performance-based deal. And there were articles that I was reading talking about that the podcast, this latest round, this Confessions one, it's only reached at max about 800,000 downloads, which for someone that's got the name recognition of a Meghan Markle, isn't that great? And I was just looking at the charts on Apple, and right now she's trending at number 78 for business podcasts. So if this contract that Meghan signed with Lemonada is performance-based, and they're probably paying her for downloads, she's probably not making a whole heck of a lot. I would venture to say she would be super lucky if she was making even 6 figures from this deal with Lemonada for this podcast. And only 8 episodes have been released. And like I said, nothing in the press, not from her directly or from Lemonada or anything, any of her other mouthpieces. No one is talking about this show being renewed. So I think what we are witnessing is the death of podcast number 2 for this woman. The first funeral we attended was for Archetypes, and now this funeral, we're in black, is for Confessions of a Female Founder. And I was also thinking about, she released, I guess, I don't know if you would even call it a season. She just released 12 episodes for Archetypes, and now she's releasing 8 for this Confessions of a Female Founder. And I'm thinking to myself, what kind of work ethic is this? People always talk about how Meghan is about 20 to 25 years behind in media and in culture. And, sitcom television for years and years and years, before Netflix, before all that kind of stuff, sitcoms ran for about 22 episodes for a season. They ran for 5, 6, 7, some even up to like 10 seasons, say if it was a Frasier, if it was really, really popular. So you had certain episodes per season, and then you had certain number of seasons for a whole series run. And that was kind of how you looked at media, like television and shows and things. You looked at it as like seasons and all that. But the way that people run their shows now, especially people that are creators and podcasters on YouTube and just on, Apple and Spotify, they just have a podcast and they just turn on their mic, turn on their camera, and they talk, whether they have help in the way of production teams and editors or whether they're people like me. They just turn on a camera and they talk. They don't say, I'm going to release X amount of episodes for a season and then who knows whether or not I'll be back. That's not really how it is. I mean, if they want to convey a message, if they want to build a brand, if they want to be out there and they want to build an audience and they want to build a community and they want to have people and just create just some type of relationship with people, they just go and they talk and they keep going and they keep talking. Why is it that people like Meghan are doing these shows, but they're only doing a set amount? I mean, how lazy do you have to be? Most of the podcasters that are out there that are killing it, like the Jordan Petersons and the Joe Rogans and the Candace Owenses and all those people, they are out there. They are producing infinite amounts of episodes. It's just continuous content for us to consume because we like them, their personalities. We can't wait to catch up with them and see what their take is on the latest things going on in politics or the media or culture. And it's just, that's what they do. They're out there. But it just seems to me like people like Meghan are just so unbelievably lazy. They're stuck in that mindset that they're just going to produce a certain finite amount of episodes and put those out there and throw them out. And then that's all they have to do. But that's not all they have to do. Someone like her, if she wants to succeed in media, in podcast media, and this is now her second go around, she's going to have to commit to just having that podcast and continuing to show up and to deliver something for her audience. And that's why she's not succeeding. She can't even do that. So she's got a business podcast, and by all accounts, this latest round I'm going to talk about, this latest episode, is with Sarah Blakeley, the founder of Spanx, who's a billionaire, mind you, okay? So she's the guest on episode 8. That's the episode I'm going to go into with you guys, and it's kind of a doozy, but there's so much evidence in that specific episode with Sarah Blakeley that I'm going to point out to you guys, which points to why this podcast failed, because nobody has a knack like Meghan does for any type of guest that she has on a podcast, turning it into a complete and total snorefest. And she did it with Archetypes. Remember, she had people like Mariah Carey, Paris Hilton, Serena Williams, and she managed to make those episodes, those types of magnetic personalities, to be a complete and total snorefest because she didn't ask them anything of substance. She always was turning it around to herself, especially for Archetypes. She didn't do it as much with the Confessions of a Female Founder podcast, but she still, even though she didn't make it as much about herself like she did with Archetypes, she failed to deliver because she didn't ask her guests who are successful entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs who built companies and businesses and legacies and careers, failed to ask them even something somewhat interesting that the listener could take away and kind of file back like, oh, that's something cool. Oh, that's something I can remember. Or that's something I can take maybe on my own business journey. Nothing. There was nothing there. Her questions were all inane. Her questions were so boring. She was asking questions in this episode 8, you guys, where I was literally, I was getting a headache because my eyes were just rolling back in my head so much. I was thinking, what are these inane questions that she's asking? And she's always saying things like, oh, I've got just tons of questions, but I'm just veering off of my question list. And I just have to ask this because, whatever they happen to be talking about in the moment is so much more interesting than it's like, you just want to shake her and be like, no. Whatever dumb little thing that you guys think is interesting in the moment while you're ha 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 he 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 back and forth, we don't care. Just give us the meat. If you are going to have a show and if you're going to have people listening and want to continue listening, you're going to have to give them something in the way of entertainment or information. She's not entertaining in of herself. Meghan is one of the most boring personalities I've ever encountered. She brings nothing to the table in of herself. So if you're going to bring somebody and invite them onto a podcast like a Sarah Blakeley, who had created a $1 billion company like Spanx, you better be prepared to ask them some questions that have some substance that the listener can take away and feel like they've learned something from. She didn't even do that. That's why this thing failed. That is why this entire second go around reiteration, this second podcast confessions, it just failed because it not only was just completely boring, it was not entertaining. It didn't have any value or any substance in the way of any type of business acumen or resources or ideas or anything. There was nothing. I lost brain cells listening to this drivel. I'm telling you, you guys, it's awful. So think about it. The most successful business ventures to date that they have had have been when Harry and Meghan are together, not alone, or when Harry's alone. So the whole With Love Meghan thing, not a success. People were hate watching. It fell off the top 10 relatively quickly. They try to pretty it up by saying, oh, season two coming, but we all know that it was all filmed in the spring of 24, season 1 and season 2. They were filmed as a bank of episodes together, just divvying it up into season 1 and 2 to make it seem like it's so popular and so wonderful that it's been renewed. But we all know what the whole truth is on that. And when you think about the other Netflix endeavors, the only other one that actually did even a little bit of success was the Harry and Meghan docuseries. Now that one was apparently the highest rated premiere for a documentary at that time. I don't know if anything has eclipsed it, but it remained in the top 10 for about a week or so. And it was fairly popular for them, but it was not critically received very well at all. They were seen as petulant, bratty, whiny, complaining, just jerks, basically. And it got a 20% audience rating on Rotten Tomatoes. So even though it had a little bit of a success, it wasn't well received with either critics or audiences. And then the only other project that has been somewhat fairly successful since they've left the royal family has been Harry's solo project, his book Spare. Now that one reached a little bit over 1 million sales in its first day of release, but it was not critically well received either. And it wasn't well received with audiences. Readers didn't even really like it. What was the big joke? That it was the most left behind book in the summer following its release. The book was basically the equivalent of people hate watching With Love Meghan. They all really didn't care for Harry at that point, and after reading the book, it pretty much sealed the deal. He just came across as a petulant, whining man boy who was just pointing the fingers at everybody else other than himself, pointing out how his family has basically destroyed his life and is continuing to destroy his life. There's no accountability. So, point being, the things that have brought them a little bit of a minor success have been either when they're together or when Harry's alone. But anything that she tries to do on her own doesn't seem to be sticking. She's throwing spaghetti at the wall constantly, trying to get eyeballs on her stuff. And she might get eyeballs on for a time, but most people are hate watching, or most people are just watching so that they can review or they can find the flaws in it, because she's not a likable personality. That's the problem. She's trying to sell us her personality, thinking that that's enough, but she doesn't have a likable personality. So if you don't have a likable personality, you can do either one of two things. You can just say, okay, well, why don't I just at least teach my audience something? Which she could have maybe done if she would have brought some meat and some real substance to that With Love Meghan series. She didn't teach anybody anything. What did she show us? How to put dried flour sprinkles on shortbread cookies, or how to put a veggie platter together, or how to rebag pretzels. She didn't show us anything on that show. So if you can't entertain us because you don't have a likable personality, and you can't teach us anything either on your podcast or on your show, the only other thing that's left for her to do is to do a reality show where the full beast of her personality is on display and where she doesn't make any excuses for it. That's really the only thing that's left for her. If she's going to want to make some kind of serious money, she's going to really have to show us her true self, flaws and all. Kind of like the way Alec Baldwin's wife Hilaria does, right? There's a train wreck there, and no one really likes Hilaria. They don't like her personality. They think she's crazy. She's like, is she Spanish? Is she from Massachusetts? I don't even think she knows. But that is what Meghan is going to have to do. She is going to have to produce a Kardashian type show and actually let us in so we can see these faceless children for ourselves. So we can see Harry, up close and personal, probably stoned out of his mind, stumbling out of the attic somewhere. Like, we're going to have to see them together. We're going to have to see the dynamic. Show us all of it. Show us a show where you are talking about all your business ventures and how they failed and how you guys are coping with it. Now, that is something that people would watch. Real and raw. Don't make excuses for yourself. If you have the type of personality that no one likes, but at least you come out and you say, this is who I am. This is my personality. This is what I've been through. This is my perspective. She could at least maybe get more than hate watching, maybe get a few more people on the Meghan train, and maybe applaud her for at least being open and honest about who she really is. But she doesn't want to do this. She's not going to let us in on her real personality. She can't entertain us because she doesn't have an entertaining personality. She has nothing to bring to the table from herself. She can't bring guests on, say, her Netflix show or a podcast because she doesn't let them shine. It's so awful. Someone in these positions of power, especially over at things like Lemonada and this Tim guy over at Netflix, they really need to sit down and they really start needing to reevaluate why they keep giving chances and chance after chance after chance to someone like a Meghan Markle who really is not worthy of all these chances, because she has proven on paper and with audiences and critics that she cannot deliver. She can't deliver the goods. She can't deliver the numbers in the way of viewership and people listening. She cannot bring interest into anything that she's producing other than people hate watching, wanting her to fail. It's just really sad. And I just don't understand. I don't understand why these people don't go out and find people that are actually really interesting, that have something to say, someone that's entertaining to watch, that can bring something to the table. Not Meghan. It's so unbelievably boring. And I'm going to get into the episode. I'm not going to go too crazy into it, but there are a few things that I want to point out to you guys because, again, I really feel like it's evidence as to why this podcast was such a dismal failure. And I really even think she's getting more flack about this second podcast. And I really think it's because, again, she's had money behind her, backing her, and she still fails to deliver because she doesn't want to work. She doesn't want to sit down and she doesn't want to do the hard work. She doesn't want to come up with any type of original content of her own because she can't. That's why all she does is interview people that she thinks are interesting. They are, but she has a knack for making them uninteresting because she's not asking them anything that's worth anything. So her whole format is just inviting others so that she can chit chat with them because she doesn't have anything original to bring to the table of her own accord. So the episode I'm going to dive into a little bit here is episode 8, where she features Sarah Blakeley, who is the founder of Spanx, which is a shapewear company. Sarah Blakeley is worth over $1 billion. She sold the company Spanx that she started in the year 2000. She sold it in 2021 for $1.2 billion. And she retained the title of executive chairwoman at the time that she sold it. So she's very smart. So she does have a little still bit of creative control there. But the podcast starts, and it's always this breathy backstory about her guest. And there's a line in there where she says, listen, over the course of our lives, we're told all sorts of things that we just sort of accept as the way things are. But she doesn't talk like a normal person. She's always with this over-dramatized, breathy, listen. I mean, she just sounds so unbelievably breathy. It's just gross. And one of my viewers said that the way she's always doing these over-exaggerated sighs, it's like Donna Summers and that song, Love to Love You Baby. And it is so true. If you don't know that song, look it up. But that's exactly how Meghan sounds. So she's, listen. And you're just like, really? And then they're just talking about how, oh my gosh, like, how are the kids? I haven't seen you. So there's a couple of things to go over. You know how everyone she ever has on her shows or on her podcast, she always has to make it seem like they've been besties since the cradle. They've been besties their whole lives. She has friendships with women, such unbelievable connected friendships with women that are just above and beyond any of the type of connections that you and I or any other mere mortal have. She just connects with people on such a way that is so unbelievably endearing and profound. But it really seems like when she actually sits down with the people or has the people on her show, or whether we're listening or whether we can see her with these people, the connections really aren't there. A lot of times it just seems stilted and very forced. And it comes across here as well because they start off talking about, Sarah says to her, and I can assume that they're on a Zoom call or something. I don't think that they're like in a regular podcast or like a video podcast, or even like the way Jamie and Meghan were sitting across from each other in the rocking chairs. It seems to me like they're on Zoom, and Sarah says something to the effect of, oh wow, like, you know, there's a cast of light on you and it's so unbelievable and you look so divine. Am I being interviewed by an angel? And Meghan's like, oh, well, I'm wearing white, you know. Can we get into this, please? Can we get into this? I have a life. I have a life here, people. But yeah, so they're talking, and how's everyone? Everyone's good. Everyone good. Everything good. Oh, when's the last time I saw you? Oh, last time I saw you. And for such good friends, Meghan's like, how old are your kids? How many do you have now? I don't remember. It's like she's so close and tight with these people, but she never remembers the names of their kids or how many any of them have. How close are you to these people? I don't think very close, Meghan. I don't think very close. And they just go into Sarah's philosophy, and Sarah seems to be very spiritual, or she thinks she is. There's no mention of God or Christ anywhere in here, but apparently Sarah is a proponent of the author and spiritualist Wayne Dyer, and she has, I guess, since high school listened to Wayne Dyer video cassettes and consumed his books and things. And he is, I guess, all about that law of attraction type stuff, spirituality, woo-woo garbage. And she just talks about how she's really been into him from the very beginning. And that has allowed her to not only remain true to herself with a strong spiritual focus, but she has then carried that into her business, where it has given her that pinpoint accuracy as to what she wanted to do and what she has achieved. So it's all that kind of nonsense. And then it's interesting though, because Sarah goes into it and she talks about how she's been involved for over 20 years with a kind of business mentorship group, but all of the people in the group are men, which I thought was interesting, because with people like Meghan and with people that run in Meghan-esque circles, they're always throwing about, you know, feminism and the power of the girl and the girl boss and this and that and this and that. But I thought that was interesting how Sarah's like, yeah, I've been in a business mentorship group for over 20 years and it's all men and we all meet and pick each other's brains. But instead of being grateful for those friendships forged and that business mentoring, of course they have to turn it around and tweak it into like, well, there's no real feminine energy. It's just this masculine male construct that has done nothing but try to put women like us down, but we rise above. And I'm just so tired of this. I'm so tired of this men versus women garbage. I could absolutely scream. Let's see. Oh yeah, there was one where they were talking about scarcity mindset, and Sarah was talking about how money is something of this anomaly, but it also is really indicative of who you are at your core, your character, right? And Sarah says, I always tell women in particular, I said, money is really fun to make, really fun to spend, and really fun to give away. I think money just makes you more of who you really were or are. If you're a jerk and you get a bunch of money, you become a bigger jerk. If you were insecure and you get a bunch of money, you become more insecure. If you were generous, you become more generous. What are you thinking listening to that? What do you think that anyone listening to those words coming out of Sarah as she's talking to Meghan, where does your mind go? Well, I'll tell you where my mind goes. The more money and notoriety that Meghan got, the bigger jerk she acted like, especially in the public forum. And you don't really hear much from Meghan after that. And Meghan knows, as soon as those words came out of Sarah's mouth, that every single one of Meghan's critics who have witnessed this woman from the very beginning, everyone that hears that is going to be like, yeah, she got more money and she got more fame and she just turned into the worst version of herself. When Sarah brought up how money seems to bring out the best and worst in people, that question or that answer rather, made her really, really uncomfortable. Because if you're going to talk about money and how it either builds and enhances an already great character or just really flatlines and makes someone who's just an atrocious human being even worse, she didn't really go and keep going along that vein. She just completely pivoted and asked something completely different, where she's just asking basically about, give us hints about what you do to keep up your spiritual vibe. Do you have any kind of inspiration? How do you manifest? And she's asking her stupid things like, well, what type of colors do you wear? And are you superstitious? And I'm just thinking that made no sense. It didn't segue. It didn't align in any way, shape, or form to what Sarah was talking about. And then they just go into this boring dribble about what they wear and how if you wear bright colors and you enter a room, it can help turn everything around within yourself and others that you're meeting and talking to. And I'm just, am I watching a Color Seasons video about how to choose my makeup colors, or am I trying to listen to a business podcast here? Just so dumb. And then, of course, they have to go on and continue to male bash and talk about how men are so awful and men keep women down. And they were talking about how it wasn't until the 70s that women could even have a credit card line without a husband co-signing for the card. And then Sarah points out how it wasn't until 1988 that a woman could walk into a bank and of her own accord get a loan entirely in her name without having a husband or a man to sign off on the loan. Which, fair enough, but then they basically go into this whole thing about how business and entrepreneurship, up until that point, I guess in their minds, until 1988, was a complete and total male construct, and women just had no part in business and no part in carving out a successful career for themselves. And I'm thinking to myself, do you guys know anything about anything? Because I remember reading about women in ancient times, Roman women, Greek women, Sumerian women, who actually had businesses and were able to hold property. Like Egyptian women in antiquity could hold properties and have businesses. You could find that out with a simple Google search. So don't completely fall for this modern, what I feel, toxic femininity rhetoric that always tries to make it seem as if up until the 60s, women were just so completely under the thumb of men worldwide. And it was such an oppressive thing. And it's only now that we're able to do things. That's such garbage. Just do a quick search about women in antiquity who were powerful and who held positions of power and could vote and could have businesses and could do things. You can make a point, but then it doesn't completely have merit to say that women had zero opportunities before. It's just garbage. And then after we're done bashing all the males in existence, we start talking about how Sarah conceived of the idea for her latest business venture after Spanx, and it's called Sneaks. And the whole idea is to make high heels that feel as comfortable as sneakers, which is actually a really cute and cool sounding idea. Just basically talking about how Sarah conceived of the idea, but you have to remember by the time Sarah's conceiving this next company, she's already made her 1.2 billion from Spanx. So yeah, it's kind of cool to see how she could come up with that idea, but there's nothing really so much after that in the way of any type of concrete advice that you could give to someone what you can do. And I also think it's interesting to mention that Sarah Blakeley is a little bit different in that for Spanx, her first company, Sarah wasn't really into getting a lot of investors and a lot of financial backing for her company. What Sarah did was she worked really hard to secure a patent for Spanx even before she knew that the idea of Spanx was sellable and marketable. And she said that she did this because she felt that if she could present an idea to people to try to sell to all these big retailers like Neiman Marcus's and the Nordstroms and all that, because that's where Spanx debuted. If she could sell this product to these retailers and all these buyers in the sense that, hey, this is patented or patent pending, and this is something you want to get in on, she thought that that would make it seem that it was a little bit more elusive, a little bit more interesting, and that people would be more interested in buying the product and getting the product in stores. Guess what? I didn't find out that information from this podcast. I found out that information from just researching Sarah Blakeley's whole business conception, Spanx, myself. I had to do that research myself. I didn't learn that from this podcast, which again tells you why this podcast is just an utter flop, because Meghan doesn't know how to ask any type of questions that are worth anything. And then, of course, later, toward the end of the episode, Meghan has to bring it back to herself and she has to talk about her jam. And she says, by the way, for me, when I started making my jam, I was all about my jam hats. People were like, what is she going on about? It's like these little, like a really chic version of the little cloth thing that I tied around. Everything is going to have a jam hat. I was like, why is she talking about jam hats? Now, as it evolves, you go, well, we're not at the farmer's market and we're scaling to something that's, you see what I mean? She's talking about, the little cloth that you can put on the top of a jam jar, the lid, and then you put the cloth and then you tie the cloth with a little ribbon. That's what Meghan's talking about. To $1.2 billion Sarah Blakeley, equating herself to Sarah Blakeley Spanx and now Sneaks. That I have jam hats, ladies and gentlemen, and these jam hats are the cutting edge piece de resistance that make my jam so unbelievably special. And then she talks about how I said, but it could be repurposed as a coaster, and wouldn't it be so cute as a hanky? I just think there's something so charming and darling about it. The vision for me was just so clear. Another pivot where you go, okay, can you just let go of that? Because ultimately, what are you solving for? And to that point in the conversation, when Sarah was talking about how she developed the idea for sneaks, she wanted high heels that were as comfortable as sneakers for the wearer. Because if you are a woman that has worn high heels for any amount of time in your life, you know how debilitatingly uncomfortable they can be. After a 6 to 8 hour day, you just want to literally take the damn shoes and throw them in the garbage when you get home sometimes. That's how hard they are on women's feet. High heels can really rip up and just tear women's feet to shreds. And Sarah talks about that in this podcast. So what she's talking about is a real need, assessing the needs, women that want comfortable but good looking high heels. That's what she's bringing to market. And then Meghan segues into it as like cloth on the lid of her jam jar. That was what led to As Ever, because she is solving the problem of having a beautifully sentimental, elevated experience that people can have with breakfast. I don't think people are sitting around worried that their breakfast experience isn't beautifully sentimental or elevated. Most of us are just getting breakfast on the table so we can get the hell out of the house in the morning on time. We're not worried about that kind of stuff. You see what I mean? She has no relatability to the actual person. She cannot conceive of anything that would be relatable that she could bring to market for anybody. Not even someone who really likes her or appreciates this kind of drivel. It's unfreaking believable. Sarah goes on about how she really got into the weeds. She wanted the weight to be redistributed properly for the shoes, and how about how the structure of high heels hasn't really changed since the 18th century, 1700s, and all this kind of stuff. And then, Meghan's just talking about, her little jam hats. And I'm thinking to myself, someone really needs to have an intervention with this woman. She has such an impossible sense of self-importance. She really does feel as if she is God's gift in every single instance. She's God's gift to podcasting. She's God's gift to Netflix because she can put on a show about hospitality and elevating the ordinary every day. You're promised that and you watch it, but you're just watching her rebag pretzels. And she's going to be the Diana 2.0, right? She's going to elevate the royal family and the whole royal brand. And what does she do? She bites the hand that feeds her, tries to disparage and destroy a family. Well, she tried to, but she didn't succeed. Tried to destroy a family in the media by calling them a bunch of evil, vile racists that made her want to off herself. So it's like everything that she promises, she does not deliver on. The bright hope that we thought she would be marrying into that family never came to fruition. All she was this light that slowly started to fade when she was in that family. And she tried to bring them down, and she tried to just de-platform them, but they weren't having it. That's what she was supposed to be, right? A breath of fresh air for the royal family. She was going to bring some much needed color to such an overly white and bland, boring family. But all she did was complain. All she did was bitch and moan. All she did was talk about how hard done by she was and how put upon she was and how no one asked her if she was okay, even though the family demonstrated over and over and over how much they bent over backwards to welcome that woman. She just wanted to bring them all down, but it didn't work. She had to hightail it out of there, and then she brought herself down once she got to America. And they just end this snooze fest by hugging and loving all over each other over Zoom. Bye, thank you, you're amazing. And Sarah tells Meghan, tell Harry I said hi. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, you probably met Harry once in person, if that. Big deal. Like, they are not friends, you guys. Nobody is friends with these two. They are media poison. So then Meghan ends this episode and she says, well, that's a wrap on season 1. I just want to say thank you, meaning us, the audience, while our ears are bleeding and we gotta like sop up the blood. She's saying, I just want to say thank you because we're so open to hearing all of these women's stories and they're so inspiring, and she's been inspired and she's hoping that we've been inspired. And thanks so much for supporting her. And she says something very interesting. I want to read this to you. She says, thanks for your support as you heard my story too, little bits of it. It's just the beginning, but my goodness, it's been really great to be able to share it with you. Just a little bit. We've heard tons of her story, both in her old podcast and now in this one. She's saying that it's just the beginning. What does that mean? What does that mean? Are we going to have more of her story? How much more of her story can we hear? How many interviews has she given? She's already talked to Netflix for 6 hours straight about her story, has she not? She's already given interviews, The Cut and to the New York Times, and how many ad nauseum articles from people. How many interviews and bits and pieces of her story are we going to have to hear, Meghan? We know your story. We know your story. You're God's gift. You're the People's Princess 2.0, and you're just here to elevate our ordinary, mundane experience. That is your whole reason for being. You are going to teach us how to be as cool and enlightened and wonderful as you. That's her story. But it's just, yeah, she's saying it's great to be able to share this with you, and she's wishing us all the best and loads of success in whatever we're going to build and whatever we're going to do. Okay, well, if we're going to have loads of success, it ain't going to be from this podcast. I would rather just go to the search bar on YouTube and just type in how to start a business, depending on what kind of business you want to start, whether it's a food truck or a brick and mortar hair salon or whatever. Just type that in. Just go how to start a food truck, how to start a hair salon, and just hit enter, and a bajillion videos will pop up. That'll be 10 million times better than this drivel. This drivel is just that. A bunch of drivel that I really hope that you didn't waste your time on. I really, really hope that you just let me do all the listening for you. And like I said, this thing was 8 episodes. I could only listen to 3. Only 3. And the only reason why I listened to this one is because of all the news reports coming out saying that there's been no announcement of any kind as to if there's going to be a season 2 of this dumpster fire, which we all know isn't going to happen now. And because I also heard that Sarah Blakeley was going to be on there, and she's really one of the only names that I could hear and identify and know who that person was. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to listen and see how Meghan can make even someone like Sarah Blakeley boring. And she did it. She did it. She made Sarah boring. And I'm sure Sarah's a very nice, lovely person. She's obviously smart. She's obviously industrious. She's retained somewhat creative control in Spanx, worth $1.2 billion. Good for you, Sarah. Good for you. Maybe we can find out a little bit more about Sarah by doing what I did, just going in Google and typing something, because you ain't learn anything about her from this podcast. And there's another thing that I noticed when Sarah's talking about Sneaks, her second company. And at one point, Meghan's like, oh my gosh, you're not sitting on your laurels and like you went off and did this. You didn't have to. You didn't have to. And that's very, very telling because you know darn well that if Meghan had 1.2 billion, she wouldn't be doing anything. So that is why Meghan is just so astounded that someone like Sarah would want to continue to create and innovate and have another company beyond what she accomplished with Spanx. Because someone like Meghan, she's working for that, 20 million, 60 million, probably a billion. You know she wants to be a billionaire, but she's that type of person where if she were to achieve that billion, she would just stop. She doesn't really care about being a creative per se. She just wants to get the money so that she can just kind of do whatever the hell she wants, which is basically be a lady that lunches for a living. And that's another thing she talked about in Archetype. Remember how she never wanted to be a lady who lunches. She wanted to be a mover. She wanted to be a shaker. She wanted to be someone that really made a difference. That's not really who she is at all. And that is so apparent in the way that she reacted when Sarah was even talking about, yeah, like even with all my Spanx success, I wanted to go off and start another company. And that's why Meghan couldn't wrap her head around that idea, because that is 100% not something Meghan would do herself. So there it is, folks. The funeral for confessions of a female founder. I just gave its eulogy. What do you think? I'm glad it's done. I don't think that she's going to be producing any more podcasts. I really, really doubt it. I think she's been burned in the whole podcast arena. To her, it's too hard. It's too difficult. She isn't going to be able to invite anybody that's going to want to come on and talk to her about anything. At least no one that has any type of name recognition. Okay? The guests were better for Archetypes. They got progressively less known in this confessions deal. There's really nowhere to go. The only way that she could have a podcast moving forward is she would have to be on by herself, coming up with something interesting to talk about. We all know that's not going to happen. So what else is next? Well, we know that, as Meghan likes to put it, season 2 of With Love, Meghan is coming on Netflix, right? But we all know it wasn't season 2. We all know they were all batched and filmed together. And based on that, don't expect it to be any better than season 1. In fact, it'll probably be a whole heck of a lot worse. What are we hearing now? That Chrissy Teigen is going to be a guest on supposed season 2? Okay, here's where it probably would have behooved Meghan to have filmed the seasons separately, because then she would have probably have been able to film something based on audience reaction from the first go around. But the only thing they can do at this point is go in and make weird, stunted, furious edits to kind of fix what's already been filmed. And that's really, really hard. And I don't think Netflix wants to pay them money to do a whole new production. Because why would they do that? They don't have anything. She's not going to have any new ideas. So what we're going to have is just as many boring, mundane episodes in this supposed season 2 of With Love, Meghan that we had in season 1. And I don't know how we are all going to get through this together, but we are. What I ended up doing for that With Love, Meghan is I think I watched maybe 1 or 2 episodes and talked about them with you guys. I don't really remember how many I ended up doing, but I didn't do the whole thing. I can't do the whole thing. I will watch, and I'll probably cherry pick the episodes and the things that I want to talk about with you guys, because I really want to feel like I want to bring something new to the table from what I'm watching, a new observation, a new whatever. I don't know if I could sit through every single one of them. I couldn't do it the first go around, and I know definitely I can't do it the second go around, but this is what we have to look forward to. So thankfully, hopefully, no more podcasts. We're done here. But With Love, Meghan is coming. And as far as ever goes, that's a whole nother video in of itself. Because, as you know, she came out with these press releases from that Fast Company article talking about how she's already looking to new things. So what does that tell you? What does that tell you, you guys? The only thing this woman has is to divorce Harry and write a memoir. And trust me on this, it is coming. It might not be now, it might not be 5 years from now, but I'm telling you, it's going to happen. I don't think they are going to last. And it's sad because They are married in the Church of England, and I don't know if it's a sacrament in their church the way it is in my church, the Catholic Church, but in any event, it still is a holy union, which I know for sure is probably going to dissolve because she's not going to want to hang out with Harry anymore because he doesn't really have much to offer her. But yeah, so that's what we have coming, guys. Tell-all divorce memoir. So hang tight for that one. It's coming. So that is all I have for you today. Thank you for sticking around with me and holding my hand as my ears were bleeding, listening to this final installment of this Confessions of a Female Flounder podcast. Let's just hope it falls further and further and further down on the charts until we hear of it no more. And I'm sorry, but that is the absolute truth. We don't want to have any more of these half-assed attempts by Meghan to entertain us or to inform us, because she's not doing either of those things. All she's doing is making our ears bleed, making our eyes cross and roll back in our heads, and forcing us to put our crash helmets on so that when we fall to the floor in agony that we won't bang our heads. So yeah, thanks for hanging out, guys. I appreciate each and every one of you. I will talk to you very soon. Bye.